Well, another night here at the Fireside Tales. Over the past few nights we have told many stories of adventure, of horror, and of hope. The following story I'm about to tell you tonight is one that is very dear to my heart. It concerns the story of one Luciana the goat. Now, to begin this story, it occurs in Haywood County, to one Peter and Nancy Haywood. Now, Peter and Nancy Haywood were a newlywed couple, and they were going to live a life in the farm, in the barnyard. Nancy herself had always wanted to be a farm girl. She had always imagined herself as a little girl running around the garden in her white dress picking flowers, or maybe walking down to the duck pond and feeding the ducks who would come quacking up to her. Her husband, Peter, had been a farm man all his life, and he expected any woman of his to be a farm girl as well. So it ended up working for both of them. Nancy became a stay-at-home wife, and I was about to say mother, but wife, and she did the usual work. She cleaned the clothes and cooked the meals. But soon she grew tired of doing the same routine day after day after day. And she resolved to do something that would preoccupy her time. So she began to look in the newspaper, and she saw an advertisement for a goat. And as Nancy looked at this, she resolved that she would get one. She had always wanted a goat. She imagined herself putting pink ribbons in its hair or feeding it sugar cubes. So that night she fixed her husband a big meatloaf dinner. And as Peter was sitting there and reading the newspaper, she asked him whether or not they could get the goat. And Peter, he thought about it, and finally he agreed. So the next day, Peter's cousin Red came in a big red pickup truck, and in the back there was a box. And Nancy was so excited as the truck came to a stop and a cloud of dust formed on the road. And the cousin Red, he got out, and Peter helped him pull the box down and put it down on the ground. And then they pulled open the lid, and there out came the prettiest little white goat you could ever imagine. And Nancy, she looked at it, and it looked up at her with its big blue eyes, and Nancy ran over and hugged it on the neck and began to kiss it on the head. So anyways, they got it at a little place in the backyard, in a little house, and so Nancy began to enjoy her time with her new pet goat. But it wasn't long before she began to realize that the goat had, well, it was becoming a bit of a problem. One day Nancy was out, and she was hanging up the clothes, and she turned around only for a moment, but when she turned her back and then turned back around, there she saw the goat, and it had eaten all the clothes off the clothesline. Nancy couldn't believe it. The goat had managed to bite its way through the fence and come right into her yard and eat all the clothes. So she fixed the fence hurriedly so her husband wouldn't notice, and then put the goat back inside. But it kept happening. The next time she was in her kitchen, and she was fixing a big apple pie for her husband. And as she turned her back, she heard a noise, and she turned around, and not only had the goat eaten the apple pie, but it also eaten all of her plates and forks and knives. Nancy couldn't have been more agitated, and she put the goat back in the backyard. And she had to keep coming up with excuses for what was going on and why things were missing from her husband's house. But anyways, she managed to get away with it, and it was only one night that the group had a party that, well, things became a problem. There were many people there, and they were all talking, mostly about World War II and what was going on at the time. And anyways, as they were all sitting down, one of the men noticed that his trumpet was gone. And they all looked around for the trumpet, but they couldn't find it. And then they heard a noise. It was a loud chomping. And they all ran into the dining room, and what should they see but that Nancy had eaten the entire couch. And also there was a loud sound coming from her stomach. It sounded like the hoot of a horn. Well, everyone stood there amazed, and Peter looked at Nancy, and Nancy looked at Peter. And Peter said that he couldn't stand the goat any more, and that he'd noticed how it was eating everything, and they couldn't have it any more. So, finally they ended up getting rid of Luciana the goat. Luciana the goat began to go to many different places. For a while, she went to a police station, but she managed to eat off one of the officers' mustaches, and she also ate one of the keys, and the jailers had a hard time putting the prisoners and had to find a different cell for them. So anyways, the police office ended up getting rid of the goat too. Next, they sent it to a fire station. But Luciana managed to eat an entire ladder, and she also ate off one of the fire station's people's pants. So they got her away, and they sent her to a shipyard. And Luciana the goat managed to eat up a whole anchor. And I'm not sure if this is true, but since this is in the book that I'm reading this from, I'm going to go ahead and mention it to you. It was said that she managed to eat an entire ship. I'm not sure if I believe that, but if you want to, you can go ahead. Anyways, Luciana was sent from place to place all over the country, until finally she managed to make it to the White House. I don't know how she got to the White House. That's not in the record either, but somehow she did. Anyways, Franklin D. Roosevelt had a heck of a time with Luciana the goat. Luciana the goat managed to eat a little piece of the Constitution off. She bit off an edge of it, and also caused a lot of disaster with the Supreme Court eating off their robes. And finally, Franklin D. Roosevelt, he found a little room, and he shut himself off, and he locked the doors, and he began to talk to his daughter and to all the people there. And Franklin Roosevelt, he said, "I think we're going to have to kill it. I don't see what else to do. That goat is nothing but trouble." And the daughter, she said, "Oh, no, we can't do that. Father, there must be something we can do. We can't just kill it." Well, Franklin D. Roosevelt sat there and he thought about it. "Perhaps you're right," he said, "but we do have to do something about it. And I just might have an idea." The next day, Luciana the goat was being put into an airplane and shipped off to Germany. She was landed, and she found herself in the midst of a bunch of Nazis, and began to eat everything in sight. She ate off the badge of one of the generals, and she even ate one of the Nazi officers' dogs. And all of the Hitler was constantly agitated by Luciana the goat, absolutely hated her. But since the Nazis were all vegetarians, they couldn't kill her. But eventually, Luciana the goat ended up driving Hitler mad, and he committed suicide. After this, no one knows what happened to Luciana the goat. Some say she ended up in the jungle, and she became a monster known by the native tribe as Wapango. Others say that she ate so much that she became fat and died. Regardless, I am glad to have presented this very true tale to you all, and for you to all know the true story of how World War II ended up coming to a conclusion. And to remember, my friends, that while some people may say magic is unnatural, that nonsense is something that is unnecessary, that we don't need in this world, that if it hadn't been for Luciana Goat and the nonsense of the Fireside Tales, the world, as we know it, never would have existed at all. And as always, sweet dreams and good night.